The Ryan Ries Show from Southern California. This is The Ryan Ries Show. Post your questions using @Ryan Ries on his Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. Are you ready?
All right, we have an amazing show tonight on this Saturday night. I have Opal Singleton in the studio from Million Kids. She's the president and the CEO. I saw her speak in Orange County at Barnabas Group, and she got up and only spoke for 15 minutes, and my head was spinning. So thank you for being on the show.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I truly appreciate it.
Well, listen, you have a huge resume and you do a lot of things. So I'm just going to let you talk about exactly what you do. I know you do a radio show and you train the sheriffs and much more. Do you want to tell us exactly what you do?
Sure. Well, let me share a little bit of my life. I am a Christian. I retired in 2000. This is my retirement you look at here.
Wow.
I had, at the time, 3 million frequent flyer miles and had a successful career. I actually took about 7 years to retire, and I became a glass artist and traveled around and did the cruise thing and the RV thing. I highly recommend that, by the way. I'm not sure I messed that up. But in 2008, my husband and I decided to start going to church, and we had not done that in the past. I was a little reluctant about churches and getting involved, but that church had a mission in Cambodia. And because of my international background, I was fascinated. I began to sell my artwork, and I went to Cambodia, and I went there several times. I actually lived there for 4 months in 2012, and I was the acting country director of the largest safe house in Cambodia with Rafa International, and I'm still on their board. In 2010, God really intervened in my life. I felt one night the need to go to a very small meeting. I was the only audience. There were 4 presenters. They were all from the Riverside County Sheriff Department and one sheriff deputy in Riverside County. Now, I know this show goes across the nation. If you don't know where I'm talking about, it's about 60 miles east of LA, about 90 miles north of San Diego. And our county's one of the biggest in the nation, covers 7,200 square miles, and we have a huge, diverse population. We have, a huge migrant and agricultural transient kind of population on the east, and it goes all the way to the Arizona border, but we also have a lot of very sophisticated schools and cities in there. So I met a deputy who had started to realize that we were having human trafficking in Riverside County, and that what he was seeing was not prostitution as usual, if you will, but rather forced prostitution. And I met him, and he said, "Would you be my training and outreach coordinator?" Because I was the only other person he had met, this is back in 2010, that knew that trafficking had a K in it. And he said that made me qualified. So people want to know what I did to prepare. I showed up, and I cared. Anyway, that was the beginning. He's told me you have to raise all your own money, pay all your own way. What he did not know about me is I'm a rabid researcher. I still am today. I have tens of thousands of hours of research, especially on technology. And so he went undercover, and I sat at my kitchen table, and the deal began. And it has been a journey since then. Now the task force is very sophisticated. We're one of 3 that is federally funded for the 3rd time in the United States. I'm the original member.
Wow, that's amazing.
Finally, after about 2.5 years of doing it for free, they put me on the payroll for 20 hours a week. So I'm making like 75 cents an hour, but I'm employed and things are looking up, I would do this for free.
Yeah.
But now our task force here in Southern California, we have 160 open cases. Many of these cases will have 10 to 30 to 50 teenagers. I was involved in their biggest case, had over 120 teenagers that were being violated. Wow. So it's been quite a journey to shorten this up here. I now have 3 jobs at USC, University of Southern California, where I train law enforcement. Those are elite schools to train law enforcement at Safe Communities Institute.
Now, are these sheriffs, cops? I mean,
yes, and chiefs of police and people who are about to be promoted, that kind of thing. I am post-certified, which means Peace Officers Standardized Training Certified. to train law enforcement across the nation. In fact, I just came back from Pennsylvania and Kansas City this last week. Can't even remember where I was. Anyway, and Anchorage, Alaska, and all over that I've trained. I served on the panel that wrote the curriculum for the state of California for law enforcement. I train at the LA Fire Training Academy for fire departments all across the nation and also statewide for code enforcement. I have 2 radio shows. I've written 2 books. I'm working on a documentary, and this is my retirement. So there you go.
How's the documentary coming? Because I know you were talking about it when I first seen you.
Well, I'm asking for your prayers for it to bring us into where we need to be. I am very excited. We have raised, you mentioned the Barnabas Group. That was very helpful in getting visibility. We have raised 2/3 of what we need. When I first started, I thought that I could get this done for like $100,000. Yeah. I'm now starting to realize that it needs to be Netflix quality. Can't see that. Yeah. Amazon, Hulu, that kind of thing. Right. Get it out to parents, get it out to kids, and then support it with the grassroots movement of people to get it in churches and also their school. Awesome. So I'm at 190,000. I'm working to get the last 110,000. We are very close to making a decision about the production company. We've formed a documentary advisory council because I want this to be world class. This documentary will not be about sex. I want to make that clear. There are a lot of sex trafficking documentaries out there. I want this to be about how the internet is made and how the new technologies will be used and how it can be used for good and how it can be used for bad. And I want it so that parents can value it, but also for teenagers. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into the technology section of this. But this is critical, Ryan. And the reason this is critical is that human trafficking is a very diverse subject, but at the core of it is gang trafficking. Gangs are 90% of the cases across the nation, and they are using social media. Now, gangs aren't like they used to be. I mean, you and I maybe think of them like over in LA where they stand around in their baggy pants and their chains and their rap music. Right. I say gangs have IT guys. They're underground, if you will. They're using dating sites. Tinder, Meet Me are the 2 biggest ones. Scout, SKOUT, a new one, My Laugh Out Loud, My LOL. And so where before the most likely target for a victim would be a foster kid, homeless, runaway, or pregnant teenager, right. Now it's straight A students who normally would never be involved in a gang, but they're on a dating site and they don't realize what they're doing.
Dude, isn't that crazy how times have changed?
Crazy. Well, you're talking about like the sophistication that's behind everything as it's strategic in their plotting. When we, talk about the subject, human trafficking, and it is something that a lot of people are speaking about. Some have some knowledge, not a lot of knowledge. When has the big push, you would say, in the last 10, 20 years, when has it expanded to the dangerous epidemic it is today?
Well, I think there are several driving forces on human trafficking. Across the nation, about 30% is foreign national trafficking and 70% is what we call domestic U.S. citizens. Human trafficking is a much broader subject than many activists really acknowledge or recognize. What will happen with human trafficking is that you'll hear a survivor speak maybe, and you need to hear them and understand their story, but that is still one person's experience. Or you'll see a documentary and some of those are more accurate than others, by the way. But I've been doing this for many years now, and what I know is it's a very broad subject. I teach an 8-hour course on it over at USC, and even then you can't cover it all. There are various kinds of trafficking.
That's what I was just going to ask you. What are all the different kinds of trafficking? Because you would just think, oh, you're getting a girl, you're selling her for sex or something.
Right.
But it's equal with boys, right?
No, it's not really. It's 17% boys, 83% girls, until we get to sextortion when we start in the next segment talking about technology.
Got it.
But for actually being put into forced prostitution, 83% are girls. Let me kind of back up a minute, because one of the things that is greatly overlooked is foreign national trafficking. And we are seeing some tremendous trends in that. Throughout the nation, what we're seeing is, especially from Asian countries, where girls are being brought in legally. You think of trafficking as smuggling or being brought in illegal or undocumented. That's a fascinating thing, because many people are brought in legally on student visas and work visas. And think about how devastating that is for those folks, okay? I mean, they're living in some little village outside of Ho Chi Minh City, and somebody comes to town and tells mom, hey, your daughter is a star, a 4.0 student. She's just graduated. I'll get her into UC Riverside, okay? I'll get her transportation. I'll get her housing. We'll take care of her. And, this girl's like out of her mind excited. The whole community raises the money. She comes in legally. They pick her up. They take her documents, and they drive right by that university. And the next thing is, she's in a sleazy little massage parlor out of Moreno Valley. And there's some Asian women there waiting for her, and she will never leave that facility. And what will happen is she'll get moved around. And one of the things that we're starting to see, not very far from where we're sitting over here in San Gabriel, was my first experience with a large-scale Asian ring. And it was run by Jerry Wang. I can say his name because he's been convicted. There were 5 of them. They were making so much money by bringing people in legally and then putting them out, tricking them and putting them out into forced prostitution. They had 50 different bank accounts in 9 different banks. Wow. This was going on throughout all of Southern California. And catch this. This is the first case I saw where when the sex buyer, called in, I'm not making this up. You got a telemarketing center. That's how big it was. You think you're going to talk to Susie Wong? You get the next girl up. They are using the same ads in like 12 different cities simultaneously. You call in, you get a telemarketing center, and they send the next girl up. And that's how big it was. So that's one style of trafficking.
I have a question. So how come these girls can't just call the cops, or they're scared to death?
Yes, part of it has to do with the culture, but no. Initially, they're tricked and they're humiliated, especially in the Asian culture. Losing face is a very serious thing. But their family back home is being threatened, and on top of it, think about this. She's come in, and all of a sudden, she's probably a virgin. That's very important in that culture. And now she's forced into this. She can't get free. They watch her 24 hours a day. On top of it, in Vietnam, you do not pick up the phone and call the police, and you're not going to do that to the Riverside County Sheriff Department. And there's a language barrier. But the biggest thing is it's connected to their families back home.
Right.
I can give you 5 foreign national cases that are being run by telemarketing centers across the nation. And so that's the reason why I want to share this with your people. I just came from Butler, Pennsylvania, and you're saying, how much trafficking can they have? They had one of those big foreign national massage parlor rings that was being run across the nation. So they're multinational, they're huge dollars, and it's all about money laundering, using other people. And these girls, number one, they come over, they get here, and then every time they go out to have sex, they are charged. First of all, they don't get the money they make for the sex act, and people need to hear this out in the audience and share this. And they're charged for their driver, their motel room, the ad that they're sold on. They're charged for everything. At the end of the day, after being violated maybe 15 times a day, they owe their captor more money than the moment they started.
Wow. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
This is evil.
But let's talk about our kids and U.S. trafficking, because I think that's really important to your people.
And yes, I want to talk about that, and also because we're in Southern California and we have the Mexico border right down the way. Now, is that just a question off the top? Is that are people just getting American kids and running them over the border? Is that
no? It can happen. I just had a case like that out of San Bernardino, where in fact she was murdered and burned, and a friend of hers almost went with her. And so that can happen, but that's not the bulk of the kind of way it's happening. Let me address the difference, first of all, between smuggling and trafficking, and then we'll get into how this is really working. There is a difference between smuggling. Smuggling, regardless of what you hear on the TV, okay? Smuggling is an illegal act. In other words, you pay your coyote money down in, let's say, Mexico somewhere, and he brings you up here. You cross over a border, and regardless of all the stuff that's on radio and TV, you have broken a federal law. Right. We have not dissolved that, and you can call them undocumented or illegal, whatever you think, but the truth is it's illegal because they have broken a federal law.
And that's what illegal means.
That's what illegal means. You're right on, Ryan. I agree. However, you're not a victim of human trafficking. Yeah. You have been smuggled. You've broken a law. Right. If you pay your coyote money, which is more often what's going to happen, and they bring you up there, usually it's about $5,000 down in California, down in Mexico, and then they bring you up here. They don't let you go. Excuse me. They say I need another $3,000 or $4,000. Okay.
Go ahead and grab a drink of water here.
Excuse me.
No worries.
They don't let you go. They say I need some more money. That is coercion. And now you're a victim of human trafficking. I need more water.
All right,
here.
go ahead and grab some water. I'm going to go ahead and plug your name. We have Opal Singleton in studio from Million Kids. She's the president and CEO. She spends her life, her retirement now, training law enforcement all across the nation. She has a couple radio shows, books, and working on a documentary. Now I'm coughing.
Must be dry.
I cannot wait for this documentary, by the way.
Thank you. Anyway, so it's important to understand the difference between smuggling and trafficking because of all the conversation that's going on. I will tell you, though, that the bulk of the cases that we see here, and one of the things I didn't tell you is I am the training and outreach coordinator for the Riverside County Sheriff Department. So I report to Sergeant John Sawyer. We have a team of 8 full-time people plus 7 on loan. And so I handle real cases. I sit with parents who are missing their kids. I sit with kids who are being exploited. And so this is the real deal. I do have a contract with the Department of Justice. And so the bulk of the cases that we see involve our young people. The average age in our area for getting into this is about 14. It just really kind of grips it. Now, human trafficking is the fastest growing crime in America. California is the number 1 state over and over and over.
Oh,
yes. Almost twice as many cases as Texas, then Florida.
Why is that?
I'm prejudiced on my opinions, but number one, having just come from Butler, Pennsylvania, it's warmer out here, so it's easier to take your clothes off.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was 8 degrees in Butler, and I'm thinking, who's committing human trafficking back here? You don't want to undress.
Yeah,
but
true.
I digress. But part of it is we have a heavy amount of gangs. California has kind of an interesting approach to criminalization. We've kind of decriminalized the idea of being a criminal. Yep. So there's a lot of that. Plus, I think that the way we raise our children out here, having traveled a lot across the United States, on the most part, we're a lot more liberal in what we consider being okay. Right. You go to a California school, you see, midriffs everywhere, cleavage, the stuff hanging out the bottom of their shorts,
Everything's hanging out.
Yep.
And, so that is part of it. And I think our kids are more willing to take chances on the internet, which is how it'll often start.
Yeah, more liberal, not
and probably a very fast-paced society, California, Los Angeles, and everything. So a lot of times there's a disconnect with the parents with their children have a lot of freedom that maybe they shouldn't have.
Right. So talking about that sort of thing, what you're seeing here is the way this works is that it'll be an independent pimp or it'll be a gang member who is a pimp. And oftentimes there's a very small line between the two. In other words, pimps will work with gang members, and many, many gang members are now pimps. Gangs are making more money selling people than they are selling drugs. That's been going on.
Them, right?
Yeah.
They keep reusing them. They don't have to replace them. But more importantly, they can use these people 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they do. And the other thing is there's a huge availability of young girls, especially, willing to take chances on the internet. And part of it is because of a fantasy relationship. I've never met a kid yet that understood what the route they were about to go down. Let me give you a couple, 3 cases to demonstrate my story, if you don't mind. We had one just this week, and I don't want to get too detailed because it's a live case. Beautiful kid from the middle of California, went on a dating site, met up with this guy. Our girls love these guys with tattoos, these weirdo I'm sorry, I'm showing my age, but some of these tattoos are scary. Anyway, she gets this fantasy relationship. You see, what happens, the kid gets on the internet, and it doesn't feel like a world with consequences. It feels like some reality where they don't have to pay a price. Yep. And, they start sending photos, and they get naked photos, and they start falling in love. And the way pedophiles work is they will only give you a little bit of information. In fact, I wrote a book on this called Seduce: The Grooming of America's Teenagers. Historically, it looks like a boyfriend for the most part. And this very girl up in the middle of California, she fell in love, and this guy is a pimp, gang member down in my area. He drives 300 miles up. Now, the parents, I was up there training, but not too long ago in middle of California.
There's not much going on up there either.
Oh, there's...
I'm sorry. As far as like for her.
Yes.
So she's like getting this fantasy of...
That whole Fresno, Madeira, the whole central part there, Bakersfield, full of gangs. And by the way, the chief of police in Fresno, he just retired. His name was Dyer. I never got to meet him. Yeah. But because I have studied every case in America for the last 10 years, the man's my hero because I see his cases. Anyway, so I talked to the parents of this girl. I was training in a school when the principal told me, "You're victims from our school." And they go into schools to recruit, and they use their girls to recruit, which they did in this case also. Mm-hmm. The parents told me, this girl, I saw her photo, she's absolutely beautiful, very smart, just a beautiful girl. And she pursued this guy, and the parents said, we did everything we knew to do. We took her out of school. We took away some of her social media, but she connected with him and disappeared. This is a tragic case because this girl was sold into a gang down here in my county. And then that gang sold her to a gang in Ventura, which sold her to a gang in Bakersfield, which sold her to a gang in Fresno, and ultimately back to her hometown.
That is incredible.
That girl was sold to 5 gangs in 4 weeks.
How old was she?
She's 16, and she's absolutely beautiful. Wow. And this case now is pending, so, I don't want to identify anybody. Yeah. But my point is she is a beautiful girl who was never able to understand what was about to happen to her. And it's happening again. I have other cases like that. I have cases out of Moreno Valley that what you'll see is a guy who's just a really bad guy. I mean, our people that follow me and kids on Facebook, and I hope you will do that, go to Facebook, find Million Kids and follow. One of the things they'll see is this 15-year-old girl's like with this really nasty guy. How did that happen? Why is she picking him? She didn't pick him. She fell in love on a dating site, and then she was traded, and she ends up with someone who's very violent. Yeah. We had a case out of Moreno Valley where he had 28 girls, all of them 15 to 18 years old, sold them across the United States, and literally, your people can't see this because we're using radio, but he tattooed his name right down the side of their faces, each one of those faces. And there were 28 teenagers in that case. See that. Yeah.
There's the camera.
Yeah.
So I got a question. Where do these guys keep all these girls?
They move them around. The way this works is, and let me back up to help your parents here. The first thing that will happen is a guy who looks like a boyfriend will swoop in, and you feel the tension. You don't like him. You start to argue with him. You argue with her. You try to, you're saying you're grounded, clean up your room. He's saying, hey, baby, you're hot. You're in that tug of war. Mm-hmm. At that point, mom and dad, you must get help. You must get help immediately for her and for you separately. This will never get any better. What is happening is you're not arguing with her and you're not arguing with the boyfriend. You're arguing with the fantasy he's created, and when a parent gets in a tug-of-war with a fantasy, they lose. So they get them in there and they break them. And I know this is a hard conversation to have publicly, but they burn them, they cut them, they rape them, they film that, they force them to watch it, they drug them, they move them from place to place, they take pictures and sell it out in pornography, they force the kids to look at their photos so that they feel like they can't go back. They're being drugged, they don't know what town they're in, they're set up in a motel, they're advertised out on the internet, and they don't know what town they're in, they don't know what name they're being sold under. And all day long this goes on, and they're picked up and moved. And so that's number one. They have a self-degrading image where they feel like they can't go back. Number two, they have kind of a Stockholm syndrome with the guy that they pursued in there. And number three, they're totally dysfunctional mentally because they're lost, they're being drugged, they're being moved around and like that. And so they don't know how to get help. And many times they will continue to go back to their predator because they feel like that's all they deserve.
Wow. They've been that broke.
Yeah.
That they think, man. Unbelievable. Okay, Opal Singleton from Million Kids. She's the president and CEO. Find her on Facebook, and she has books. She does her own radio show. A lot of information. As we're talking about this, just speaking to the Southern California people, what have you seen in Southern California as far as like with Orange County, LA, Riverside County, High Desert? Is there a difference, or is it all pretty much? Because I live in Orange County, and I've seen heard a lot more information of human trafficking situations there.
Yes, actually here, there's not a difference in the counties because we share victims. Okay. A case will often, you'll get recruited in Moreno Valley, you'll be usually taken over to San Bernardino, sold out in Ontario, Garden Grove, El Monte, Garden Grove, Los Angeles, Long Beach, going south into San Diego, sorry.
No worries.
Get real handsy here. Anyway, and so you're on that circuit. So we may start a case in Riverside, but just like our girl that I talked about before, we're working with Ventura County, or we're working with Fresno,
Yeah, 'cause they just
or we're
hop
working with
around
San
all the
Diego.
days, yeah.
And so we all work together. There are 2 federally funded task forces in Southern California, Riverside and Los Angeles. So we're dedicated. Others will have it, but it'll be part of a sheriff department or something like that. So we will all work together, and then the case lands wherever we can get it through court. But here in Southern California, it is absolutely rampant in every county that we have. And it's rampant even going north up to Fresno and Oakland and believe it or not, Redding, Portland, Seattle, and all across, and Las Vegas. But, I just came from Pennsylvania and Ohio. It goes right across those corridors there with that you'll see where they're being moved around. And so depending on the gang activity, for instance, the East Coast and West Coast, we have MS-13 gangs that will do that. That's
Where are they located?
Heavy in LA, moving out this way somewhat, but MS-13 is an interesting thing. We hear about it from President Trump, and I think people think of it as a political issue, but I've been talking about that long before he was in office. MS-13 is Mars Salvatrucha. They started in our LA prisons, and then we deported him way back when, and they went back to El Salvador, and now they're back.
Okay, you know what? Hold that thought, because we're going to be going to break. This is amazing information. I have Opal Singleton in studio from Million Kids, president and CEO. We're going to be going to break in a few minutes, but I do want to plug you guys into the Whosoever's movement. We are continuing to tour schools. This is why we want to get in front of kids and let them know that God has a plan for them. And if they align their will with His, they won't end up in a lot of these situations. And if you want to see any of the past shows, you could download our app, the Whosoever's, on the App Store, which has all the past shows for the last, 2.5, 3 years, maybe longer now. But it's all available there for free video, so you can see what's actually happening in studio. Love you guys, and talk to you guys in 2 minutes.
More of The Ryan Ries Show coming up. Post your questions at Ryan Ries on his Instagram, Twitter, and or Facebook. Now, back to the Ryan Ries Show.
The show was going to be intense. The good thing is we're actually going to do a double show. So what you guys are hearing now is going to be one show, and then the next following weekend we're going to do another show hitting on social media and what's happening there, and that's a whole nother level. So I'm back in studio with Opal Singleton from Million Kids. She's the president and CEO, has a couple different radio shows, books, working on a documentary, and trains law enforcement all over the United States.
Right.
So thank you for being here. Yes.
MS-13 is a fascinating gang. They were the first transnational gang declared to be transnational by the U.S. Treasury Department back in 2012 because of the amount of money that they make and are transporting that back to El Salvador. The reason why they're unique is they're particularly violent, and they use their gang members to really recruit our girls, especially they'll often do this in school. They're mainly headquartered in LA and over in Virginia and New York and the Baltimore area. However, what is fascinating to me is when I was training the Alaska State Troopers, they're up in Alaska, in Anchorage. They operate like a clique. They're different than like Bloods and Crips, where you maybe see them and they're very visible and intimidate you. They're very quiet. They move quietly across the United States. They're in western Wyoming, coming out of Salt Lake there. They're in Joplin, Missouri. I saw a case back in Butler, Pennsylvania when I was there. And so the reason I point that out is suddenly they'll have a very violent case. We had a girl case back east, and she was 16 years old, just beautiful. She had a boyfriend, but she flirted with an MS-13 guy one time, and they considered that a love triangle. They invited her by social media to meet up with them. I can just imagine how scared she must have been. Anyway, she showed up. They stripped her naked. They took fence posts. They took turns stabbing her to death. They filmed it and they narrated it. We just had a case like this over here by Simi Valley of a guy who made the mistake of putting a line through MS-13 graffiti, just one. And they got him into a public park, and they ended up beating him to death with machetes, cutting his heart out, putting it on a stake, and dispersing his body parts. So they're very violent, and that's the reason why I want you to understand they really are. I think their motto is rape, kill, and something else. I can't remember. Something like that. Yes, and so they're very violent. Now, I want to get back a little bit about this grooming thing.
Yes.
Because gangs are using it to groom, but so are individual pimps. And so I wrote the book, Seduce the Grooming of America's Teenagers. I would encourage your people to order it.
Yeah, where can they find it?
You can get it at Amazon, but quite frankly, if you'll buy it from millionkids.org, I will sign it for you, and we have more of the money that goes to the work.
Perfect.
And we use that to fund our work because we're a reasonably small nonprofit. So I want to talk about grooming. There's about 3 ways that grooming really takes place. There can be maybe 4, but usually 3. The primary one is this boyfriend thing where he swoops in, he gives her everything, and that's the ones that the parents see most often. And the book Seduced is all about how to help a parent unpack that fantasy where you're in there. Because what happens when you meet someone on the internet, it isn't like if you date them for 9 months, you know who they are.
Right.
On the internet, you can talk to someone for a long time, but they don't give you anything about themselves. You're making up everything you want. And we're all like that. By the way, adult dating sites are like that. You know, you get on there and, and I'm a widow who's newly engaged here, but back before that time, one time I went on some of those dating sites and you look at it and you go, wow, look at that sailboat. And my assistant Mona said to me, Opal, didn't you write a book on fantasy relationships? It was amazing how quickly you could get sucked in to you want what you want. And our kids really want that. So he'll look like a boyfriend. He'll give her everything. And then the next thing you know, he turns the table on her. Hey, baby, I know I've been buying this stuff for you, but I'm a little short of cash. Just need you to help me out here. I have a friend here and it'll be fine with me. He really admires you and it'll help us pay the bills. This girl sees herself in business with him. She does not see herself in prostitution or him as a pimp. And by the way, we don't call her that either, ever. But she will be starting to be loyal. And then he ups the ante. I need you to do this. I need you to do that. Pretty soon,
he's asking her to go to sleep with
have
with
sex over and over. And pretty soon, she has a quota of 8 to 15 guys a night, and he's keeping all the money. And he begins to beat her, and it changes. And I do want to share with you, I heard
And she's still living at home.
Well, sometimes, but usually by that time she's ran off with him.
They are living at home.
Yeah, and she's moving around. Yeah. I heard a survivor once, and I greatly admired this lady, but I thought it told the story well. She said, I met this guy, and he wanted me to do this. And I said to myself, I'll do this, but I won't do that. And then he kind of upped the ante and it got worse. And I said, I'll do this, but I won't do that. And then pretty soon I had a quota. I was being beat. I couldn't eat. And he was demanding all kinds of things. And I'd say, I'll do this, but I won't do that. And then she said one day there was no more that. Yeah. And that's called Romeo pimping. Now, there's guerrilla pimping out there, and this is male or female. I'm going to come back and do the male. We just talked about Lawrence Gunn that had the 28 girls. That's just somebody who's very violent. They just beat you, they tattoo you, they burn you, they cut you, they move you around, and you can't get free. And
it's all fear.
Yeah, if you get free, they'll kidnap you back. Yeah. They will. But the other one is female guerrilla pimping, and 60% of the cases of human trafficking, the girl is recruited by another girl.
That's high percentage.
Yes, and it's usually in a school. You'll often see that in there. And
by another student.
By another student who is, in fact, set up in that school. That's why I train in schools all over Southern California to watch for that. And by the way, this is really big of the undocumented, or what do you call those, unaccompanied minors that get here. Think about that. These girls owe their coyote money, And so they're going to either earn it themselves or they're going to recruit other people to do it. And so it goes very, very quickly in the recruiting process, usually under 5 days. The first sign that a girl, she'll be a little bit older. She'll probably be a senior or junior, and she's preying on a freshman or sophomore. Usually, for whatever reason, the first sign is they get them a set of nails, maybe some technology. But what they'll do is where the boyfriend pimping goes on for months, the female, it's like 5 days. And what'll happen is they'll take her somewhere, water park, someplace, and sell her into a gang. And then poof, the girl's gone. And that is called what we call a bottom girl. It's actually called something else out on the street, but I don't use language like that, even on the radio. Yes. So we'll just call her bottom. So at that point, that's when they begin to get sold out. They're sold in truck stops, and we have done a lot of training in this area with trucking companies. They're sold at special events, like I worked with the FBI up at the Super Bowl up Santa Clara.
Yeah, I've heard about the Super Bowl stuff.
Truthfully, I only saw about a 15% bump when during that, but they did a lot of hype. But you know how we have Stagecoach and Coachella out here?
Yep.
That all of a sudden it went way up. They'll be sold there. Or they'll be sold at conventions where there's engineering and technical conventions. Not a lot of talk about that. But for the most part, they're sold online. Now, the biggest one used to be Backpage, but they're out of business. They shut them down. Now, that we should all be celebrating that, except it's made law enforcement's life much more difficult. Because what happened is that there's this law that says if you're advertised or you're promoted on a site and you end up being violated, you can sue the site. So all the sites went off. I keep doing that. All the sites go offshore. Sorry.
Don't worry, that camera's on me anyway.
Okay. Anyway, all the sites went offshore, so they're horrible. Like people like myself would look at them every morning to support my team.
Yeah.
And now they're like horribly pornographic because they're offshore. They're in Albania, Belize.
I got a question. It's talking about websites. What about the deep web?
Well, we're going to get deep into that in the subject
that will be
on
the
there.
Next
right.
topic. Okay.
Deep web, to answer your question briefly, is really used by child pornographers. So if a pimp is selling a girl who's under 18 and taking those photos, he will sell those out for child pornography, and they will end up with pornographers in the deep web.
Got it.
Right now, most of your sex trafficking is taking place in the surface or clear web where we all live.
Right.
But
where
the
people
photos
could actually have girls. But this
Right.
is more like underground
Right.
photos and videos of pornography.
But your point is well taken, Ryan, because it won't be long, I believe, in probably 18 months, that cyber sex on demand, webcam sex, or what I call interactive pornography, where they put people in front of webcams to commit sex acts, is kind of like homegrown or amateur pornography.
Yeah.
I believe it'll be the biggest crime in the world probably in less than 18 months. And it will be at that point what you'll see is more and more of those sites will find the person on the clear web, or the area we live, and then they will be sold out into subscriptions in the dark web. So I believe we're going to transition in the next 18 months.
Wow. Unbelievable. Okay, so did you talk about the LA case? Is that the LA case that you wanted to talk about?
Actually, I wanted to talk about a case that I was involved in because I think it's important for parents to hear this. I was involved in bringing in the largest case in Riverside County. Had 120 victims that we took to court. We believe might have had over 200 victims, all teenagers. The way recruiting takes place is either because you want to be loved, and by the way, that's why foster kids are so vulnerable. 60% of kids in prostitution come from foster care.
16%.
60. And it's because they don't have they don't have that anchor relationship. They have a hole in their heart.
Yeah.
And in California, we give them a cell phone, and they say, okay, I'm going to kiss a few frogs, but one of them's going to believe in me. By the way, Million Kids' motto is, I believe in you. We give out bracelets to foster kids. We sell them for $1 a piece, and then everyone we sell, we give one to a foster kid. So So a lot of it is you want to be loved, you want to be liked, you want to be approved of, like that. But the other one is what we call the easy money scheme. They will make it look like you're going to make a lot of money in modeling or being in a rap band. That's a huge one, being in a rap band. Or sometimes just how you pick up extra money doing prostitution. So my case that I got involved with was a 44-year-old Hispanic guy out of Hemet, a small town out in Riverside County. He was married, had 3 children. He was a realtor. His name was Eliaberto Jacoba. And this was back when our kids were still on Facebook. It took us about 3 years to get him to trial. And so he got the photo of a girl. He called her Marissa Garcia. We don't know if he knew her or if that was her name. That was some name he made up. And Marissa, in his fake Facebook article, she was a prostitute. She had a brand new car. She got her nails done. She went to Vegas. She went to dinner. She had everything she wanted. And according to her Facebook page, you too could earn this kind of money. And so, believe it or not, more than 200 of our teenagers in the Inland Empire contacted this Facebook page.
Wow.
They don't know they're talking to him, and they said, show me how to make this kind of money. So when I talk to kids, we talk about the easy money scheme will be the most expensive money you ever earn. Yeah. Well, what happened is more than 100 of our kids, almost about 120, went to the next level after talking to Marissa Garcia, and many of them met up with him and had sex with him. When he was through, he set them down and said, let's look at the videotape we just made together.
That's it. That's
you
how
are
they get 'em.
now in it. And, they were absolutely humiliated. They were terrified. 17 of them were put into hardcore prostitution. Now, let me tell you what's powerful about this. I've been training in schools now for about 8 years, I think. Trained tens and tens and tens of thousands of kids. One day I was training, and at the second session, 2 beautiful little girls come up, about 15 years old, had long, kinky hair. They were laughing. They thought it was a joke. I've never met a victim yet that understood what was about to happen, and they were one of them. They handed me, or 2 of them, they handed me their phone, and they said, Miss Singleton, you think this is something because we're just playing a game with this girl. Just playing a game with a girl. That's all they thought. And I looked at that and I called my boss. And we started that case. Before it was over, we interviewed over 200 kids. We were able to take 120 of those kids' cases to court. And by the way, shout out to law enforcement. It takes a mighty effort to take 120 teenagers and put a case together for court. Anyway, He ended up got 122 years in prison. He appealed, he lost, and he'll be there for life. But I share that with kids because never once did those kids understand the route they were about to go down.
They just thought they were playing a game.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing with social media.
Yeah.
With this aspect, I know there's so many things, and I know we have another show that we're going to do too, but what is the biggest thing that parents need to be aware of? How prominent is this danger that we're facing in our society today?
It is absolutely prominent. I believe the answer to this is building a partnership between a parent and a child.
Yeah.
But if you're already down that road where you don't have that kind of relationship, then I would ask that you sit down and re-examine the relationship and figure out how to back it up. Truthfully, it's a dual problem, the parent and the child. One of the problems, and we'll really get into it with technology, is that most parents have almost no understanding of how the internet's made and how each of these apps work. Now, many parents are very concerned, so they get these ghost apps, these trackers, and all of that's good, filters, and all of that is good, but you are about to reach a stage where those won't work. And we'll get deep into that in your next show when we get talking about technology, and I encourage your listeners to be sure and tune in the next week to hear it. But it really has to do with the fact that they have to get involved, and we have to have this tough conversation. It's a fascinating thing that is happening. I believe that 8% of America's teenagers are being violated through social media exploitation. 70% of teenagers involved in sex trafficking were previously sexually violated. If you're now getting 8% that are being socially violated, you're creating a whole new inventory for kids who are more likely to take chances on the internet and end up meeting up with someone, going out and trying to either build a relationship or negotiate back where they're being blackmailed.
And it all goes to that fantasy.
And goes out into the fantasy. So the name of the game for a parent, number one, I'd encourage you to buy Seduced, The Grooming of America's Teenagers. And the next book that I have, which we'll talk about next segment, is called Societal Shift, A World Without Borders, A Home Without Walls. Educate yourself, mom and dad. It's a hard conversation to have, but it is real. And by pretending it's not out there and refusing to understand how it works is literally making your child so much more vulnerable. The other thing is, then once you understand, is let's make leaders of your children. I talk to thousands, tens of thousands of teenagers. They don't want to be violated. They don't want to get involved in this. They want to be leaders. Most kids are great kids. But what are we doing to prepare them for a world without borders, where literally pimps can come into their bed at 3 o'clock in the morning going, hi, let's get acquainted.
Oh, my goodness.
And, so we have to prepare the parent, and then we have to prepare the child. It is up to us as Christian parents to be able to give them the education, the knowledge, the tools and resources so that they can be leaders in the most important generation that's ever lived.
Yeah, if we don't train them, we're just setting them up for a failure. And that's why you're seeing the high statistics with the kids from foster homes and from broken homes. I mean, 50% of the kids in California come from broken homes.
That's right.
I mean, I was just in Mexico. I was just in Durango last week, and they were telling me how like a lot of these kids are growing up, going to the cartel and stuff because they come from broken homes. I said, well, where are their dads? They said they're all in America.
Right.
So they're coming in through getting smuggled through coyotes. They're here. They're leaving. So we got kids there that are coming from broken homes. You got kids here in broken homes, and you see what's happening.
Yeah. One of the things I want to address with your parents is talk to your kids about running away and don't run away. Get a plan B. Just assume the day will come when your kid doesn't agree with you, okay? And sit down and talk with them and say, if this reaches this point, go to your pastor, your youth leader, your neighbor, your Aunt Mary, your Uncle Bob. Go to somebody. Go to your school resource officer. Go to somebody, but don't get on the street. Depending on whose statistics you read, 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 7 teenagers who run away will be a victim of sex trafficking in the first 48 hours. It goes just like that. They're absolutely vulnerable. So to have that tough conversation with your kid and say, you're growing up in the most exciting time in all of history, but you're also growing up in one of the most dangerous times. And so I want to come alongside you and prepare you. To be able to just come alongside with your kids, shaking your little finger, going, thou shalt not, what are you doing, will not get it. No. You must form a partnership with your child.
When we're talking about all these things, you have brought up so many aspects, from the different ways of grooming, from a boyfriend to girls that get involved, also with like the guerrilla aspect of the threat and being very aggressive. And so they're able to access them a lot of times through dating sites, different stuff. That's one way. Right. Schools. Where are some other kind of locations that are vulnerable for young people?
Well, we'll really get into the new technologies in the following week on that segment, because there is something called mass audience live streaming. At least that's the name I've given it. The most common one now is TikTok, and the other one is Likee. You're about to have Lasso from Facebook, and then what started it was Live.me. All of those are different than the normal technology. If you think about when we were on Facebook, your kid had 45 followers and we were freaking, who are those people? Right. And do they have a friend of a friend? And how do we track them? Those days are gone, man. It is not uncommon, as we'll really get into technology in your next segment, for a child to have 500,000 followers. And, they see that as an exciting and good thing, and it will be the way of the future. However, if you have 500,000 followers, how many of them are bad guys, especially if you don't know who they are.
Yeah.
You know, my math isn't all that strong, so let's say 1%, 500,000 followers, that's 5,000 pedophiles that can text back and talk to your child. So this is the reason why I'm saying we must draw a line in the sand. By the way, this is why I'm creating a documentary that we want to get funded out there, because I want to show parents how this thing is made and how it works, and I want to show kids. Kids don't want to be violated. We must give them the equipment to understand the world they're living in.
So I think when you spoke, because I've heard a couple different people speak on human trafficking, were you the one that said it's like, putting your kid, having a device is like dropping your kid at a house party, and you have no idea what's going on, but what's going on inside the house party, you got pedophiles, drug addicts, all these people. Was that you that said that?
I said something similar. The one I like to say sometimes is it's kind of like taking your 9-year-old, if you give your 9-year-old a phone, dropping them off on the 91 freeway without mentioning the cars are going up and down the freeway. And then when they get hit, you blame the pavement. You know, it is happening out there, and we have to understand it. Sometimes parents will say to me, when should I give my kid a cell phone? And I say, well, have you had the sex talk yet? Well, no, they're too young for the sex talk. Duh.
Yeah.
If they're too young for the sex talk, they're too young for the phone, because somebody's going to have the sex talk with them.
Everything is there.
Yeah.
I mean, all they have to do is just hashtag, and you can find whatever you want.
Oh, absolutely. And that's exactly what they do.
On Instagram, I was watching funny videos.
Yep.
And I clicked on this video, it had a funny face.
Uh-huh.
I clicked on it, and it was actually porn.
Yep.
I'm like, I told my wife, I'm like, dude, on Instagram, just on a funny video website.
When she started off this show, and we're talking about how strategic everything has been, it doesn't surprise me that there's all these different, avenues to be able to go through. They think through all those aspects to get much traffic as possible.
Right.
I got a interesting thing that happened to me. This was probably a couple of weeks ago at my house in my living room. Someone told me, hey, check out this video. It's called Rich in Faith. It was like about a pastor. It's like a TV show, like Oxygen or something like that. Mm-hmm. So I watched the trailer on Facebook. In my living room, my kids are there, my wife, everyone there. And then the next video that comes up after was soft porn.
Yep.
After a Christian TV show,
right.
The next video that slid in, it opened up to soft porn. And I'm like, call my wife. I'm like, dude, look at this.
Let me give you a different example.
We have 48 seconds.
I'll save it for next week. I wanted to talk about video game chat rooms and animated video game character pornography. So your folks need to come back next week.
They will be here, I guarantee you. Listeners, you'll be back, because whenever we have these epic shows like this, they can't get more. They're going to be telling me, bring her back on, and we'll bring you back on in months to come after you have more content and more stories. So, all right, where can you find this show? Download the Whosoever's app. It's all free. It's the video cast. You can watch it there. 3.5 years of archives. And if you want to learn about Jesus, we got the Gospel of John on there too. You can book our Kill the Noise tour. We tour all over the world. We're everywhere.
Can I give my email address?
Oh, please.
Absolutely. If folks want to reach me, they can reach me at Opal, OPAL, at millionkids.org. Follow us on Facebook at Million Kids, or go to millionkids.org to see our website.
That's a wrap. So we will, remember, tune in next week. She will be in studio. Talk to you guys later.
This has been The Ryan Ries Show. To connect and find out more about Ryan, click on ryan-reese.com. Check us out next Saturday at 9 p.m. for The Ryan Ries Show.